Okay, let's dive in. You've handed us an essay called Ideals and Ironies, When Reality Challenges Belief. And right in the middle of it is this. Well, sort of pretty sharp saying, kind of cynical, that you sometimes hear.
It definitely doesn't pull any punches, that's for sure. The phrase is, you will be a feminist until you get married, a communist until you get rich, and an atheist until the airplane starts falling.
Oof. Yeah, that lands, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive, really leaning on the insights from this essay you gave us, is to explore what truth, if any, lies under that saying. It seems to argue it's a provocative way to look at how our deeply held ideals often get tested. Tested hard when they bump up against our own lives, our comfort, and maybe even our fears.
Right. The essay doesn't just dismiss it as cynicism, it frames it as reflecting this real tension between what we believe and how we actually live.
Holding an ideal when it costs you nothing. That's one thing.
Exactly. It's when there's a personal stake involved, that's when, according to the source, your conviction really gets shown.
Okay, let's try and unpack that piece by piece, just like the essay does. First one, you will be a feminist until you get married.
Right. So the essay quickly reminds us, feminism is fundamentally about seeking equality, political, social, economic, for all sexes.
Yeah.
The implication here is that marriage, this very traditional institution, might somehow dilute or compromise those feminist beliefs for someone.
And does the essay get into why? Like historically, maybe?
It absolutely does. It points straight back to history, like Victorian England, talking about coverture.
Coverture.
Yeah.
What exactly was that?
It basically meant that when a woman married, her legal identity, her rights were essentially swallowed up by her husband's.
Wow. Your entire legal identity. So losing the right to own property or sign contracts, even rights to your own kids sometimes.
Precisely, yeah. That really puts the fight of early feminists into context, doesn't it?
It really does.
People like Mary Wollstonecraft, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they were directly fighting these laws that made marriage itself a place of, well, patriarchal control. The institution could be fundamentally unequal.
Okay, but things have changed a lot since then, legally at least. How does the essay connect the saying to, like, now?
It argues that even with the legal shifts, the day-to-day practice of marriage can still throw up challenges. It highlights things that persist, like the unequal share of unpaid domestic work.
The housework and childcare stuff.
Exactly. The essay mentions a 2020 UN study. It found women globally still do about 3 times more unpaid care work than men.
3 times. Even when both partners work.
Even when both have jobs outside the home, yeah. That's a huge imbalance.
You can see how that could definitely test feminist ideals within a relationship.
For sure. And the essay also brings in more critical perspectives, like Simone de Beauvoir, who saw traditional marriage as a kind of mechanism of control. But it also points out how public stances can shift. It uses Ivanka Trump as an example, cited in the source, noting that someone who was maybe once more vocal on certain women's issues seemed to shift her rhetoric after entering specific political and family roles, becoming more aligned with conservative views.
Okay, so the essay's main point here isn't that marriage just automatically kills feminism for everyone.
Yeah.
That's the key takeaway.
The essay suggests it's more that marriage tests it. It forces a confrontation.
Yeah.
When your feminist ideals meet the daily grind, the compromises, the established routines, maybe the power dynamics in a long-term relationship,
Yeah.
you face a choice. Do you actively work to uphold those values, or do you kind of slide into patterns that might be more comfortable but maybe less equal? That's that friction.
The friction between the big idea and the intimate reality. That makes a lot of sense. Holding a principle in theory versus living it out at home. Very different things. Okay, so that's the feminism and marriage part. What about the second bit? You will be a communist until you get rich. This feels like it's about ideology versus, well, getting wealthy.
It is. Yeah, this part really zeroes in on how getting personal gain, personal prosperity, can shift your view on things like wealth distribution and class struggle.
Communism, broadly speaking, is about abolishing class, sharing wealth more fairly.
Right. But the saying asks, what happens when you're the one who accumulates a lot of that wealth? Does the ideology hold?
The essay brings up George Orwell here, which is really interesting. I mean, Animal Farm, Road to Wigan Pier.
Yeah.
Huge critiques of inequality and power.
Exactly. He was a committed socialist. But the essay points out that Orwell himself wrote critically about the potential hypocrisy, let's say, of some leftist intellectuals, people advocating for radical change, but from a position of relative comfort.
Ah, so it wasn't just about being rich, but about the comfort that comes with it.
Yes, the source suggests his writings kind of question whether you can truly champion revolutionary ideas if you aren't willing to give up your own privileges, your own comfort.
That comfort, the security, the influence that wealth can bring.
Right.
That's hard to give up for a collective ideal, I imagine.
It really is, and the essay points to examples. It talks about individuals, not always named, who were strong socialists early on but seemed to pivot more towards capitalist ideas or themes once they achieved significant financial success.
Any specific public figures mentioned?
Well, it brings up the kind of criticism Bernie Sanders sometimes faced, about owning multiple homes, and the debate that sparked around whether a personal lifestyle can seem at odds with a message about economic inequality.
Right, I remember that discussion.
And it even mentions cultural figures. The source cites Jay-Z and Kanye West as examples where maybe earlier comments or lyrics had notes of class struggle, but their focus later seemed to shift much more towards celebrating individual success, entrepreneurship, big wealth.
So the essay suggests the pull of wealth is just really strong.
Incredibly strong, according to the essay. The comfort, the security, the status, the influence. These are powerful lures. And the essay argues that pursuing or just holding on to that personal wealth can act as a kind of silencer.
A silencer of ideological purity.
Yeah.
It's quite a phrase.
It is. It suggests it might not always be a conscious decision like I'm abandoning my beliefs, but maybe a more gradual shift, influenced by the very real advantages that money provides.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much are our ideals truly core convictions, and how much are they maybe conditional on our situation?
That's the fundamental question it seems to raise.
Which leads us perfectly into the last part, maybe the most visceral one. We will be an atheist until the airplane starts falling. This one really hits at fear, doesn't it? Fear and mortality.
Absolutely. Atheism at its core is grounded in skepticism and reason, rejecting supernatural explanations. But this part of the saying, and the essay explores this, suggests that in moments of just extreme fear, especially when you're staring death in the face,
rationality might waver.
Exactly. That raw human psychology can challenge that philosophical stance. The essay talks about anecdotal stories, atheists finding themselves praying in a crisis.
Like in wartime or...
Yeah, wartime, facing a terrifying diagnosis, or, well, the classic example, an airplane hitting severe turbulence.
Does the essay give any more concrete examples?
It does, yeah. It brings up Christopher Hitchens quite prominently, one of the most famous, most vocal atheists of recent times, a very sharp critic of religion.
Right.
The essay notes that even Hitchens, as he was facing his own mortality from cancer, was very aware, keenly aware, that any sign of fear, any cry of pain might be twisted by some people after his death as proof of a last-minute conversion.
So he even warned against that interpretation.
He did. The source mentions his final writings included a warning, basically telling people not to believe such rumors if they surfaced.
Wow. That Hitchens example really underscores it. This isn't just a cheap shot at atheists. It taps into something deeply human about facing the ultimate unknown.
It really does. The essay points to those moments. The hospital bed, the near-death experience, the plane shaking as triggers. Situations where that primal fear can just surge up and make people grasp for something, anything, beyond logic or science.
So the essay isn't necessarily saying these people suddenly stop being atheists in their core beliefs.
Not necessarily. The essay seems to frame it more as, well, a testament to just how complex we are as humans, our emotions.
Yeah. Rational
thought is a huge part of us, how we navigate the world. But that primal fear of death, of the unknown, it's also incredibly powerful. And the essay suggests it can sometimes, maybe just temporarily, override even very firmly held rational views.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together then. We've got feminism and marriage, communism and wealth, atheism and fear. What's the central thread connecting all these, according to the essay?
The core idea running through all three parts seems to be this. It's relatively easy to hold on to ideals when they don't cost you anything, when they're comfortable, when they aren't challenged by your immediate reality.
But the real test comes. When?
The real test, the essay argues, comes when those ideals rub up against your personal comfort, your personal wealth, your relationships, or your most fundamental fears, like the fear of dying. That's when you find out if it's just an opinion or a real conviction.
So it's about the pressure test, essentially.
Exactly. Belief without that kind of challenge, the essay implies, is kind of untested. Conviction is what's left, or what you actively fight for when things get difficult, when there are real personal stakes.
And the essay is fair, right? It doesn't say everyone caves under pressure.
Oh, absolutely not. The source is careful to include that. It points out, many feminists navigate marriage while strengthening their advocacy. There are wealthy people who use their resources explicitly to fight inequality. And countless atheists face death with incredible resolve, holding onto their worldview right to the end.
So the saying highlights the challenge, the potential vulnerability, not some inevitable outcome for everyone.
Precisely. It's about the difficulty, the test, not a universal failing.
Understanding that, then. It's less about judging people for seeming inconsistent and more about acknowledging that belief is, well, it's complicated. It interacts with the messy reality of being human.
Yeah, it adds a layer of maybe empathy or at least complexity when we look at how people's actions line up or don't line up with what they say they believe. Life tests those beliefs.
This whole deep dive into the essay Ideals and Ironies really shows how that blunt saying we started with, it zeroes in on a really uncomfortable spot. That tension between our principles and our lived reality.
It really pushes you to think about what your own ideals actually cost you, or what you'd be willing to give up for them. Is it comfort? Security? Facing the unknown without reaching for a familiar answer?
In the essay, it leaves us with a final thought, quite a powerful one to chew on. It suggests that those people, maybe rare people, who do manage to hold on to their core values even when the plane is metaphorically falling, they're rare because their ideals weren't just comfortable opinions for sunny days. They were principles that were truly rooted deeply enough to withstand that ultimate pressure from reality.
That's a powerful distinction to make. Deeply rooted principles versus easy opinions.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for bringing this essay to us. It was definitely a fascinating source to unpack in this deep dive.
It really was. A lot to think about there. Glad we could explore it.